The passengers were still settling into their seats when the plane pushed back from the gate. People were talking, placing bags, arguing lightly about overhead space. But in seat 14B, a woman sat very quietly, almost unnoticed. She had a calm face, hands folded, eyes focused on nothing in particular. She did not speak to anyone, not even when the person beside her asked if she needed help with her seatbelt. She just nodded politely and continued to sit in silence. To everyone, she looked like a normal traveler, maybe tired, maybe lost in thought. No one paid her more attention than that. The crew moved up and down the aisle, doing safety checks. The flight attendant glanced at the quiet woman and smiled, but the woman only gave a small nod back. Something about her seemed different, not strange but controlled, as if she had lived many serious moments in life and nothing could shake her now. Still, no one thought more about her. After all, quiet passengers were common, especially on long flights. As the engines grew louder and the plane lifted smoothly into the sky, the passengers relaxed. Some opened books, others pulled out snacks, and a few leaned back to sleep. The quiet woman simply looked out the window, watching the clouds drift below the wings. There was no expression on her face, no fear, no excitement, just a steady calmness that did not change no matter how the aircraft tilted or climbed. About 20 minutes into the flight, something unusual happened in the cockpit. The captain suddenly noticed a communication alert flashing on his screen. It was not from the airline, not from the tower, and not from any normal civilian channel. It was a frequency he had never seen on any commercial route. He exchanged a confused look with the first officer. There was no emergency, no weather issue, nothing that would cause a military channel to open. The captain tried to ignore it at first, thinking it might be a technical glitch, but the alert kept returning every few seconds. The frequency was strong and intentionally directed. Someone wanted a connection, and the signal was coming from outside the plane. The crew in the cockpit became uneasy. They did not announce anything to the passengers because everything inside the cabin was normal. But they kept checking instruments to see if another aircraft was near them. That was when the first officer's eyes widened. Two fast-moving aircraft were approaching from the left fighter jets, moving in a tight formation. The captain leaned forward. "That can't be right," he whispered. "Why would they be here?" The passengers, completely unaware, continued with their snacks, conversations, and daydreams. Only one person seemed to feel something, the quiet woman. She looked out the window again, but this time her eyes sharpened. She noticed the faint shadows across the clouds. Only a trained eye would understand what those shadows meant. The plane leveled, and a gentle announcement came that they were reaching cruising altitude. But the quiet woman knew something was happening outside. She took a slow breath, still not speaking a word. Yet her posture changed. It was subtle but real. She was not just observing now. She was preparing. Inside the cockpit, the captain received a new alert. This time it was a direct message, short but clear. The fighters wanted to confirm an unknown signal they had detected coming from inside the passenger plane. They were not hostile, not threatening, just verifying something unusual, and without warning, the quiet woman reached down and adjusted the small wrist device she wore. It looked like a normal watch, but it wasn't. She pressed a tiny button on its side, and for the first time since she boarded the flight, she quietly whispered a few words. They were spoken softly, almost as if she did not want anyone around her to hear. The cockpit suddenly lit up with a sharp, clear audio signal. A woman's voice, steady and calm, filled the channel. It carried a tone that only trained pilots understood. It was not a civilian tone. It was something else entirely. The captain froze. The first officer stopped breathing for a moment. The fighter jets outside reacted immediately. Their formation tightened, and one of them adjusted altitude. With complete precision, they were responding to the voice they heard. Or more accurately, to the authority behind that voice. The message was simple. It was one sentence. But it was enough to shake the entire formation of jets outside. "This is Eagle One. Do you copy?" The cockpit went silent. The F-22 pilots did not just copy. They recognized the call sign instantly. And their reaction, absolute stillness, told the captain that this quiet passenger was not someone ordinary. Back in 14B, the woman relaxed her hand as if she had simply turned off a casual reminder on her watch. She looked out the window again, calm as ever, while the jets outside held their position like statues in the sky. No one else on the plane knew what had just happened. But the pilots outside knew. And now, the flight crew knew too. They were not carrying an ordinary traveler. They were carrying Eagle One. The captain tried to steady his breathing as he listened to the silence that followed the calm message. He looked at the first officer. And the first officer looked back with the same expression, confused, tense, and unsure what to say next. They had trained for emergencies. They had practiced hundreds of scenarios. But none of those lessons included a moment where a passenger on their plane used a military call sign that even F-22 pilots responded to with complete stillness. The captain finally pressed his communication button and spoke quietly. "This is Civilian Flight Alpha. We need clarification." "Who is Eagle One?" The radio crackled, but no one answered. Not the jets, not the woman. The only sound was the faint hum of the engines. The captain leaned back slowly, trying to think. Someone with that call sign should not be on a commercial flight. Someone with that authority should not be silent. He had no idea what to do next. Meanwhile, in the cabin, everything looked normal. Children were laughing, someone was telling a story to a friend, and the smell of warm tea drifted softly through the air. None of them had any idea that two of the most advanced fighter jets in the world were flying beside them because of one quiet woman in seat 14B. The woman stayed still. She did not look nervous or proud. She did not show any hint that she had changed the entire energy of the flight. She simply watched the clouds in silence. But deep inside, something she had tried to leave behind was waking up again, a passing flight attendant stopped and checked on her. "Ma'am, is everything okay? You look a little tense." The woman gave a gentle smile. "I'm fine, thank you." Her voice was soft, but there was a strength behind it, a strength the attendant could not identify but felt. The attendant hesitated, as if she wanted to ask more, but she moved on, not wanting to disturb her. A few rows behind, a teenager noticed the fighter jets outside. At first, he thought they were part of some show or training exercise. But the jets were too close, too steady, and moving with a kind of alertness that made him uneasy. He tapped the shoulder of the man sitting next to him. "Look outside. Is that normal?" The man glanced out and frowned. "That's strange. They usually don't fly this close." But he decided not to make any noise, thinking the crew would inform them if something was wrong. Inside the cockpit, one of the fighter pilots finally spoke. His voice carried a level of respect the captain had never heard before. "Eagle One, this is Sierra Wing. We are standing by, awaiting your direction." The captain stared at the radio again. He had flown for 20 years. He had been through storms, medical emergencies, last-minute landings, and long-haul flights that pushed his limits. But never had he witnessed fighters offering their direction to someone sitting quietly among regular passengers. The woman in 14B tilted her head slightly when she heard the pilot's voice through her device. She had not meant to reveal herself. She had hoped this flight would be uneventful. Just a simple journey where she could breathe like an ordinary person. But destiny had a habit of calling her back. She pressed the small button again, but this time her voice carried a different tone. It was steady, but softer, as if she was trying to prevent the situation from growing larger. "Sierra Wing, maintain distance. No interference. This is a civilian flight." Outside, both jets adjusted their formation instantly. Their sharp maneuvers cast quick shadows over the clouds. The teenager watching felt his stomach flip. He was the only one who kept staring outside. Unable to look away from the dramatic sight, the captain wanted answers, but he understood that pushing too hard might cause more trouble. Instead, he made a decision that surprised even himself. He left the controls to the first officer, unbuckled, and stepped out of the cockpit. Passengers looked at him with curiosity as he walked down the aisle. Captains rarely stepped out during the early part of a flight, especially when things seemed normal. He stopped beside seat 14B, and the woman turned her head slightly, acknowledging him before he even spoke, as if she had sensed him coming. "Ma'am." He began slowly, keeping his voice low so others would not hear. "May I speak with you for a moment?" The woman looked straight into his eyes. Her gaze was calm but carried a kind of depth that made the captain feel like she could see everything he was thinking. She nodded once. "Yes, I understand why you came." He took a slow breath. "We heard the transmission." The jets responded. "To you, I need to know if there is any danger to this flight." Her answer came without hesitation. "No, there is no danger. Not to this aircraft, not to the passengers." The captain felt a wave of relief, but also more confusion. "Then why are they here?" She looked toward the window for a brief second before returning her gaze to him. "Because they recognize something I tried very hard to leave behind." The captain did not understand the full meaning, but he understood enough. Whoever she was not a threat. She was someone important, someone the sky still listened to. "Do we need to change course?" he asked. She shook her head. "No. Continue as planned." He nodded, uncertain but trusting her. As he turned to walk back to the cockpit, the woman looked down at her hands. Her life had changed years ago, yet here she was again, pulled back into a world she had tried to forget. Outside, the F-22 jets flew with perfect discipline, guarding the flight without announcing themselves. Not because they had to, because Eagle One was on board. The captain returned to the cockpit with a calm face, but his mind was full of questions. He sat down, fastened his belt, and closed the door behind him. The first officer looked at him immediately. "Who is she?" he whispered. The captain shook his head lightly. "Someone the jets respect. Someone who does not want attention. That's all I understood." The first officer raised his eyebrows but did not push for more. He had heard the transmission. He had felt the energy. Whoever she was, she carried authority without speaking loudly, and even the sky seemed to respond to her presence. Outside the window, the F-22 jets remained in a steady formation. They did not move aggressively or signal danger. They simply accompanied the plane like silent guardians. Their precision, their discipline, their stillness, it all seemed to tell a story of its own. In the cabin, passengers began to notice the jets more clearly. People sitting near windows started pointing and whispering. Some thought it was a training exercise. Others assumed it was an escort for something happening far away in the sky. But no one imagined the reason was sitting quietly among them. A young girl looked out and tugged her mother's sleeve. "Why are those fast planes flying with us?" Her mother smiled lightly. "Maybe they're just practicing." The girl looked again, puzzled. "But they're not going away." Her mother didn't have an answer and simply told her to focus on the movie she was watching. Meanwhile, the quiet woman in 14B remained still, though her eyes softened when she noticed the child staring at the jets. She turned her gaze back to her window. She had lived in worlds where every small movement meant something, but she had left that world behind. Or at least she had tried to. A soft announcement from the captain broke the silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, everything is normal. We are cruising smoothly. Please remain seated while we prepare refreshments." His voice was steady, but he chose his words carefully. He did not mention the jets. He did not mention the signal. He did not want to raise questions on a flight that was entirely safe. The flight attendants continued serving drinks, though they exchanged uneasy glances whenever passengers whispered about the jets outside. One attendant paused near 14B again. Noticing the woman's calm posture, "You're really not worried about those jets?" she asked in a soft voice, hoping she wasn't overstepping. The woman gently shook her head. "They are not here because of danger," the attendant frowned. "Then why?" The woman gave a kind smile, one that carried a sense of history. "Because sometimes even silence speaks louder than words." The attendant didn't understand, but she respected the tone. She nodded and walked away, feeling something unusual, like she had just spoken to someone who carried weight far beyond what her simple seat number suggested. Back outside, one jet suddenly shifted slightly, adjusting its distance from the plane. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't a warning. It was a signal, one that only trained military personnel would understand, and the woman understood it instantly. She closed her eyes for a moment, not to sleep, but to steady her mind. She recognized the pattern, the small tilt in their movement. It was a question, a check-in, a silent request for confirmation. She pressed the small button on her wrist device again, but her voice remained low enough that none of the nearby passengers noticed. "Sierra Wing, status confirmed. Maintain line. No further contact unless required." The pilot responded with a short acknowledgement, but his tone carried a hint of something deeper: respect, relief, and a kind of admiration that came only when one speaks to someone whose name is recognized far beyond the ground. Minutes passed, and the tension inside the cockpit lowered. The jet escort remained steady, but no alarms, no alerts, no new messages appeared. The flight settled into a quiet rhythm again, though the crew's minds were still wide awake. In the middle of the cabin, an elderly man sitting across from the quiet woman kept watching her. Not because she looked suspicious, but because she looked familiar. As if he had seen a face like hers somewhere long ago, in a place not meant for ordinary people. He leaned slightly toward her. "I hope you don't mind me saying this, but you seem very calm for someone flying beside fighter jets." She turned her head gently. "Calmness is something you learn when life teaches you enough lessons." He smiled softly at her words. "You sound like someone who has seen the world from places the rest of us never could." She didn't answer that. She only looked out the window again. The old man narrowed his eyes, trying to place the feeling. He had served years ago, nothing major, nothing heroic, but enough to know that the woman sitting in front of him carried something in her silence. Something earned, not given. "Did you serve?" he asked quietly. The woman paused. "Once. And the jets out there, are they here for you?" She didn't confirm or deny it. She simply said, "Sometimes the past follows you even when you walk away from it." The old man nodded slowly. Somehow, that answer was enough. Far beneath the aircraft, clouds drifted, like soft mountains, unaware of the quiet tension in the skies above them. The sun cast a warm glow across the wings, and the plane continued forward as if nothing unusual was happening. But inside, something had changed. People didn't know who she was. They didn't know her name. They didn't know why the jets held their position so carefully. But slowly, row by row, whispers spread. There was something different about the quiet woman in 14B. Something the sky recognized. Something even fighter jets listened to. She knew this was only the beginning. The plane moved deeper into open sky, and the afternoon light softened into a warm glow through the cabin windows. People who were earlier whispering about the jets began to relax again, accepting that the flight was continuing normally. But a few passengers, especially those sitting near the wings, could not ignore the two F-22s that still traced the planes. Movements with perfect precision. The quiet woman in 14B kept looking ahead, her posture still calm, but there was a subtle change in her eyes. It was not fear. It was not nervousness. It was something else, an awareness. almost like she could hear a conversation that no one else in the cabin could dot in the cockpit. The captain reviewed their route again, though he wasn't really checking for navigation. He was checking for signs, anything unusual, anything that might explain why the fighters refused to leave. But there was nothing. The sky was open. The weather was calm. Their flight plan was approved. Everything pointed to a normal day except for Eagle One sitting. In the cabin, he looked at the first officer. "They're not leaving," the first officer nodded. "They're waiting for her." The captain sighed quietly. "I don't know who she is. But whoever she was before, the world clearly hasn't forgotten." Back in the cabin, a light turbulence rolled through the plane. A few passengers gripped their armrests. A child gasped. Softly, but the woman in 14B didn't move even an inch. Her calmness was so steady that the man next to her looked at her with curiosity. "Not scared at all?" he asked. She shook her head gently. "This is nothing. Turbulence is just the sky breathing." The man blinked, surprised by her words. "You've flown a lot?" She gave a small smile. "More than most people think." Before he could ask more, another subtle signal flickered across the woman's wrist device, a soft vibration. She angled her body slightly, shielding it with her arm. Not wanting to draw attention, she pressed the button once, as if answering an old friend. A brief, coded tone came through. Too short for passengers to notice, but long enough for her to understand. She whispered back, barely moving her lips. "I read you." Outside, one F-22 dipped its wing, a movement so small that most passengers didn't notice. But the teenager from earlier, still glued to the window, saw it. He whispered loudly, "Mom, the jet signaled something." His mother sighed. "It's just the wind, sweetheart." But at WASN single quotes T. Inside the cockpit, a secure transmission suddenly appeared. The fighter wing had identified the quiet woman in 14 bytes, not by her civilian identity, but by her military history. The captain read the message slowly, his breath catching as he scanned the details. Retired, classified. High clearance. Negotiated operations role, unknown final assignment. The last line made his hands freeze. Designated priority, Eagle One. The first officer leaned over. "Is that real?" The captain didn't answer, but deep inside, he knew the truth. There were only a handful of people in the world who received a title like that, people whose missions were never spoken about publicly, people whose decisions had shaped events without the world ever knowing. And she was sitting in 14B, drinking water quietly while everyone else debated if the jets were part of a show. He looked through the cockpit window at the F-22s outside. They weren't just escorting. They were standing by, waiting, protecting. It wasn't fear they were reacting to. It was honor. In the cabin, the elderly man from earlier watched her again. Her stillness reminded him of officers he had met once, long ago, people who carried themselves with a kind of calm that came only after they had already faced the most dangerous parts of life. He leaned slightly closer. "You don't have to answer this, but were you someone important?" She exhaled softly, not irritated, not offended, just tired. "I was someone who made choices," she said. "Choices that changed things, choices that came with a heavy cost." The elderly man nodded. "And now the sky remembers you." Her eyes softened. "Yes, but I didn't want to be remembered today." A gentle ding echoed through the cabin, drawing everyone's attention. A flight attendant made an announcement. "We're about to cross into controlled airspace. Please stay seated with your belts fastened." The woman in 14B closed her eyes. For a moment, controlled airspace meant new radar zones, new signals, new questions. If the fighters stayed with the plane any longer, it could cause international confusion. She whispered into her device again. "Sierra Wing, hold pattern outside. Sector, continue escort until boundary." The fighter pilot responded instantly. Understood. Eagle 1, do you require additional coverage? No, she replied. Not today. The pilot hesitated before speaking again. It is an honor to fly beside you. The woman's eyes lowered, sadness touching her expression. The honor was never meant for me. The transmission ended. Outside, the jets held their position, waiting for the exact moment the plane reached the airspace line. They would leave then, but only because she had told them to, not because their duty was complete. The teenager watching the jets suddenly shouted, "They're pulling back!" Passengers looked out. Some gasped softly. Some seemed confused. But no one knew the real reason. Only one person understood completely. The woman in 14B watched the jets fall back with slow, graceful movements. Her expression didn't change, but her breathing did. It became heavier, deeper. She wasn't afraid, but something inside her was waking up. Memories she wished she had forgotten. A world she had stepped away from, a name she had not heard in. Years. Eagle 1. The F-22 slowly drifted back, holding a respectful distance now. Their sharp silhouettes faded slightly into the sun, but they did not disappear completely. They stayed far enough not to alarm the passengers, yet close enough to respond the moment she called again, if she ever did. The woman in 14B watched silently as they moved. Her expression did not reveal much, but the small shift in her shoulders showed something changing inside her. Not fear, something heavier. Something she had carried for years, but never spoke about. The passengers around her relaxed again. Some pulled out snacks, some started chatting, and a few even joked about the jets being free airshow entertainment. Life inside the cabin began to feel normal again, but her world did not return to normal, not after hearing that call sign. Again. She looked down at her wrist. The device was now silent, yet it felt heavier than before. It was not just metal. It was history. It was a reminder of everything she had left behind: missions, nights spent in hangars, decisions made in seconds that shaped destinies, voices of pilots who trusted her guidance without question. She had walked away from all of that. She had wanted peace. She had earned peace, but peace had a strange way of being temporary. A flight attendant approached her with a soft smile. "Would you like something to drink?" She blinked, returning to the present. "Just water, please." The attendant nodded. But before walking away, she paused and whispered, "You seem very strong. I don't know why those jets reacted like that. Thank you for staying calm. It helped all of us." The woman gave a gentle nod. Calmness comes from knowing when to worry and when not to. The flight attendant didn't understand the deeper meaning, but she appreciated the reassurance and walked away. A few rows behind her, the teenager who had been watching the jets could not hold his curiosity anymore. He whispered to the man beside him, "I think they're here for someone on the plane." The man chuckled. "Don't start stories. It's probably nothing." But the boy kept staring at 14B, sensing something that adults could not. Sometimes, young eyes notice truths hidden in plain sight. In the cockpit, the captain and first officer monitored the radar. The jets had not fully disengaged. They were shadowing the plane at a distance. The captain knew this was unusual, but he also knew better than to question military protocol, especially when it involved someone like Eagle 1. "Should we inform the control center?" the first officer asked. The captain shook his head. "Not unless something changes. We were told there's no danger." "And she? She seems to know exactly what she's doing." The first officer leaned back in his seat. "I wonder what she used to be." The captain didn't answer out loud, but inside, he believed she had once been more than the call sign suggested. Not just a pilot, not just a leader, someone who had commanded the kind of respect that even silence could echo. Back in the cabin, the elderly man from earlier shifted in his seat and spoke gently to her. "You know," he began, "I once met a pilot who carried this same look in her eyes. A look that belongs to someone who has seen the sky in ways the rest of us never will. She didn't look at him directly. The sky teaches many lessons. He nodded, yes, and it remembers the people who shaped it. She finally turned toward him. I didn't shape it. I only did my part. The elderly man smiled softly. Modesty is a quiet shield. But even humility cannot hide truth. Her eyes dropped to her hands. She didn't want attention. She didn't want recognition. The call sign Eagle One was a name she thought she had buried the day she walked away, but the jets had reminded her of something else. She had never truly left. The sky did not release its guardians easily. A sudden announcement cut through the moment. Ladies and gentlemen, we may experience minor rerouting due to airspace adjustments. Passengers grumbled lightly, but no one was upset. Simple reroutes were normal, but she knew this was not normal. She could feel it. A faint ripple of energy went through her, like a memory knocking on a door she had locked years ago. She glanced out the window again. The jets had shifted formation. Slightly, not closer, not threatening, but attentive. Ready. They sensed something, and so did she. She pressed her wrist device again, but this time she didn't speak. She only listened. A coded tone came through, a pattern she knew too well. It wasn't an emergency alert. It wasn't danger. It was a check signal. From the ground, a tower she had worked with long ago. A tower she had believed forgotten her name. Her eyes widened slightly. The old man noticed the change. Are you all right? He asked. She swallowed softly. Someone just recognized me from somewhere I never expected. Is that good? I'm not sure yet. The tower's signal came again, slightly louder this time. A message blinked on her wrist device, a text-only transmission. Confirm identity. Eagle One, is it really you? Her breath caught. The world she left behind was asking her a question she did not want to answer. Outside, the jets held their perfect line. Inside, the plane moved smoothly. Unaware of the history unfolding in row 14. She hesitated, her thumb hovering over the button. If she answered, everything would change. If she didn't, the sky would not rest. Finally, she whispered so quietly that no one around her noticed. This is Eagle One. Reading you. The message delivered. Somewhere far below, a tower controller froze. Somewhere outside, both jets tightened formation. And somewhere deep in her heart, a past she had tried to outrun finally caught up with her. Asterisk. The message she sent, those 4 quiet words, seemed to echo through the space around her, even though no one else heard them. This is Eagle One. Reading you. It was a sentence she thought she would never speak again. A sentence that once carried weight across borders. Across skies, across moments where seconds meant everything. She kept her eyes on her hands, breathing slowly. The world outside did not pause, but inside her, something shifted. Memories that had stayed silent for years began waking like distant thunder. The wrist device vibrated again. A text blinked across the screen. Eagle One, control requests private. Confirmation. Are you active? She closed her eyes. Active. That word carried layers, responsibilities, history. She had not been active for a long time. She had closed that chapter with a heavy heart, believing she had earned a life beyond constant duty. Another message appeared before she could respond. We believed you were gone. She blinked. Gone. Many people in her old world believed that. And she had allowed them to believe it. It was the only way to step off the path she had walked for too long. She whispered softly into her wrist device. I stepped away. There was a pause, a long one. Long enough to make her heart shift uneasily, then understood. But your presence has activated a recognition protocol. She felt the air leave her chest for a moment. Recognition protocol. She knew what that meant. When certain call signs appeared, systems remembered them, even if the person behind them tried to disappear. Old records woke. Old signals aligned. Old loyalties resurfaced. She felt the elderly man next to her watching her again. "Is something wrong?" he asked gently. She shook her head lightly. "Not wrong, just unexpected," he nodded. "Life has a strange way of returning us to the places we tried to leave." His words struck deeper than he knew. Another message came through. "Eagle 1, request. State your purpose on this flight." Her fingers hesitated. The truth felt small compared to the weight of her past. "Traveling," she whispered into the mic. "Nothing more." The response came quickly. "Copy. Monitoring continues." She lowered her hand slightly. Her silence returned, but it did not feel peaceful this time. It felt like the sky was waiting. Outside, the F-22s held a mirrored formation, moving as though they could sense every shift in her heartbeat. The teenager watching them leaned forward, amazed. They moved again. He whispered to his mother. His mother looked out and frowned. "They really are acting strange." In the cockpit, the captain watched the jets too. He didn't know the details, but he knew enough. They weren't just escorting a flight. They were responding to someone specific. "Do you think she's in danger?" the first officer asked. The captain shook his head. "No, they're not. Protecting us from her. They're protecting her." The first officer blinked, stunned. "Protecting Eagle 1? The captain nodded quietly. "Yes, that's exactly what it seems like." Meanwhile, the woman in 14B stared at the sky outside. Her heart felt heavier with every passing second. She had lived a life where the sky answered her voice. She had guided people through moments no ordinary civilian would ever understand. But she had paid a price, one she never spoke about. She glanced around the cabin. Ordinary people, ordinary lives. Not a single one of them knew how close the past had come to reaching into this quiet moment. The wrist device vibrated again. But this time the signal was softer, almost hesitant. She checked it. A short message appeared. "Eagle 1, is it really you?" "Request verbal." She froze. This wasn't a formal message. This was personal. It was from someone she knew. Someone who had once flown beside her. Her throat tightened. She pressed the button, but her voice barely escaped. "Identify." There was a crackle, then a voice she had not heard in years, older now. Tired, but unmistakable. "It's me," the voice said. "I never thought I'd hear you again." Her eyes widened. She felt her heart drop into silence. She closed her eyes, hearing echoes of the past missions flown side by side. Nights spent in briefing rooms, trust built in storms and danger. "You're still on the ground station?" She whispered. "Yes," the voice answered softly. "And when your call sign came through today, we thought it was a mistake." She swallowed hard. Her silence said everything. "Where have you been?" the voice asked. "Away," she answered. Gently, trying to live differently. The voice grew quiet for a moment. "We respected your choice, but knowing you're alive, it means something to all of us." She felt something inside her chest soften, something she had not felt in years. The world she had left behind had not forgotten her. It had been waiting quietly, hoping for a sign that she still walked under the same sky. "Eagle 1, the voice continued. "There's no request from us today, no mission, no protocol. Only, it's good to know you're here." Her eyes shimmered, not with tears, but with emotion she kept tightly guarded. "Thank you," she whispered. The transmission ended. She rested her hand in her lap again. Calm returned, not the calm of hiding, but the calm of someone who had finally been seen again. Outside, the F-22s held their line, no longer tense, no longer searching. They moved with quiet dignity now, as if satisfied simply knowing she was safe. Inside the cabin, nothing appeared unusual. People laughed, watched movies, planned their trips. Only one small truth floated silently through the air. Eagle 1 had not returned to duty, but she had returned to the sky, and the sky remembered. ***The Piltia Sky outside began to shift as the aircraft moved closer to its destination. Light clouds stretched across the horizon, glowing softly as the sun dipped lower. Inside the cabin, the mood was calm again. Passengers chatted, stretched, and checked their watches, unaware that a story much larger than their journey was unfolding. Quietly in seat 14B, the woman Eagle 1 sat, with her hands folded, looking out the window as if she were seeing two worlds at once, the peaceful sky before her, and the world she had once navigated with unmatched precision. The coded voice she had just spoken to still echoed faintly in her mind. It wasn't the words, but the feeling, the reminder that she once belonged to something larger than herself. For years, she had run from that feeling. Today, it had found her again. The elderly man beside her cleared his throat gently. "You look different now, lighter somehow." She offered a small smile. "Sometimes hearing an old voice reminds you of who you used to be." "Is that good?" "It's complicated," she replied softly. "But maybe it's also healing." He nodded thoughtfully, sensing that she was beginning to make peace with something long buried. In the cockpit, another alert blinked on the captain's screen. He tapped it nervously, then relaxed. It wasn't danger. It was simply confirmation that the F-22s would disengage soon as the aircraft approached controlled descent. The military jets were no longer tense. They were simply escorting her with quiet respect, one last gesture before letting her go. "They really are here because of her," the first officer whispered. The captain didn't deny it. "And whoever she is, she wanted no attention. Respect that." The first officer nodded, humbled by how effortlessly she had commanded the sky without raising her voice or seeking recognition. Back in the cabin, the teenager who had watched the jets the entire flight suddenly sat upright and gasped quietly. "They're leaving." Passengers turned to look. The two F-22s slowly drifted outward, widening their formation, wings glinting in the light. Their movements felt ceremonial, somehow graceful, respectful, like a salute done without words. The woman in 14B watched them go. Her eyes softened, her breath steadying. She knew what they were doing. It wasn't a goodbye, it was acknowledgement. A silent message from the sky that it remembered her, honored her, and wished her peace. As the jets pulled further away, the teenager pressed his forehead to the window. "I've never seen anything like that," he whispered. The elderly man looked at 14B, then back at the jets. A knowing smile crossed his face. He said nothing. A gentle announcement echoed through the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will begin our descent shortly. Please prepare for landing." Passengers straightened their seats, stored their belongings, and began adjusting to the end of the journey. But for one person on the plane, this descent meant more than reaching a destination. It meant stepping into a new chapter. Or perhaps returning to one she had paused long ago. She felt the plane tilt gently. She breathed in deeply, the kind of breath someone takes when something inside settles into place. The elderly man leaned close one last time. "I don't know who you were," he said softly, "but I know who you are now. Someone trying to live quietly. And that is enough." His words touched her more deeply than he knew. "Thank you," she whispered. The plane continued its descent. She felt the familiar pull of gravity and the slight hum beneath her feet. For the first time in a long while, she did not feel the need to hide from who she was. She did not feel fear or regret. Only acceptance. Her wrist device blinked once more. But this time, the message was simple. "Safe skies, Eagle 1. She smiled faintly and turned the device off, completely off. It was a choice she had not made in years. Not to run from the past, but to take control of the present. As the wheels touched the runway, the passengers clapped softly, relieved and joyful. She remained still, but a small warmth spread across her face. The aircraft rolled toward the gate. People unbuckled and reached for their bags. The teenager still stared out the window, searching for the jets even though they were long gone. The elderly man stood slowly and smiled at her. "Take care, my friend." "You too," she replied, giving him a respectful nod. When it was her turn to exit, she walked down the aisle quietly, just as she had entered, unnoticed by most, unforgettable to few. The captain stepped out of the cockpit as she approached the door. Their eyes met. He did not ask questions. He simply gave a small, sincere nod, a nod given only to someone whose presence had changed the air itself. She returned the nod. No words were needed. She stepped off the aircraft and onto the jet bridge. The hum of the airport, the chatter of travelers, the ordinary world, everything felt normal. But inside her heart, something had changed. She had heard an old voice. She had felt old loyalty. She had been recognized not as a legend, not as a call sign, but as a person. And as she walked toward the terminal, she realized something. She was no longer running from her past. She was walking forward with it. Eagle One was not returning to duty. Eagle One was returning to herself.